Let's go. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you're able to tune into this episode of In Conversation With. I am really delighted that today I am joined by Phil Rowe. Phil, we've been talking about doing an In Conversation With for about two and a half years now, and it's finally happening. I'm really glad that we've got this time together, so thank you for that. Why don't you give people a bit of an introduction to you before we get started?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, Dave, and thank you. Yes, this has been going on for a while. I'm glad we've been able to finally pin each other down. So yeah, my name's Phil, and I'm a psychotherapist, clinical supervisor, and been in practice for about 15 years, and worked in mental health and addictions, and during that time trained as a shamanic practitioner, and whereby over the later years been finding means and ways of weaving my shamanic spiritual healing work, trying to find ways in weaving it into my psychotherapeutic work, and it seems to be working slowly, gently. It's a very unique way of being, having two approaches to deal with one particular issue, trauma, if you will.
Yeah.
And being an eclectic type person myself, I find it quite easy to weave different threads together to make a modality, if you will, for that client that sits in front of me. And generally,
yeah, no, go on. Sorry,
that's okay. And generally, as usual, if clients in the psychotherapy world want to look at their spiritual aspects of themselves, that's when I can bring that sort of work into it. And if they don't, then we don't go there, and that's absolutely fine. And then I see clients separately for healing, shamanic work. I do lots of different stuff in that world, and also see clients separately for psychotherapy and supervision, as well as a mixture of both.
And that is, as you know, you kind of finished off exactly where I was going there. It's client led, isn't it?
All the way.
Engages.
For me, it's client led for sure. Yes.
Yeah. And that I think is something that, you know, sector wide we're seeing more and more people kind of going through the therapeutic journey in the modern mindset, as it were, and realizing that there's that spiritual kind of natural element that they then can see existing within themselves. Almost, you clear the path, if you like, that allows individuals to be able to recognize that there is that component to their own identity.
Absolutely. And but again, it's such an individual path, Dave, that and even though it's an individual path, it's a very wide path as well. And yes, so and it can be quite a long journey for people if they do want to go onto the spiritual path, because for me, not only is it about the work on a one-to-one basis, it's about the work that goes on outside of that therapeutic space, if you will.
Yeah.
And there's lots of stuff, if you will, that can be done that you wouldn't necessarily do in talking therapies, i.e. getting people connected to shamanic healing drum circles, which has been going on for thousands of years as tribes and communities come together and share with each other and use the drum as a medicine tool for self-healing, self-promotion, and promotion of a community. There's lots of other things like sweat lodges, and there's lots of other sort of practices that go on outside the healing practice with the, with the healer, if you will. Whereas in the psychotherapy world, that's not so much the case, in my experience.
Yeah, and I think the term shamanic has kind of really come to the fore in the last sort of 5 or 6 years in Western consciousness. But the elements that make up that term, the practicalities of that practice and that modality, have been around for millions of years.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's probably the oldest, from my research, the oldest practice that's been going.
So for those that have heard the term, and you've mentioned a couple of those elements with the drum circles and a sweat lodge, what for you does shamanic mean?
It's a really good question. I think it's quite subjective. And there's different views on what shamanic is, and shamanism and a shaman. If you want to cut it back to its roots, a shaman fundamentally is the chief of a village, basically, that is a medicine man that can work with plants, medicines of this natural world that the pharmaceutical industry have. That's a subject on its own. Because they can't regulate a lot of the plant medicines, they make a lot of the plant medicines illegal. They just have no way of regulating it. And obviously they have their own products they want to sell. But anyway, going back, so the chief is able to work with lots of plant medicines generally, and also able to go to other worlds, to bring visions to the community and to individuals, and seek advice from spirits of one type or another, and to seek guidance from the spirit world, and they bring that back into this world, which they've called the middle world, and in order for the survival and meet the needs and the desires of that community. That's fundamentally what it's about, and living off the land, using the land to your advantage, to your survival.
And almost, it's almost a partnership, isn't it? When we look at kind of, I don't like attaching the ancient way of living, but pre-Victorian kind of way of thinking was very much more in balance with our environment, in balance with ourselves, and working kind of in a symbiotic way with the world around us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like very much like, the Jungians of the world, they're, unbeknown or beknown to them. A lot of the work, the shadow work, working with symbols and archetypes and dreams and so on and so forth. I'm not specialist in those areas. I can work in those areas, but I'm not specialist. Is shamanism. It comes from the stems of shamanism.
Yeah. And the label, if you like, that is used now was very much, for millennia, there wasn't a label. It was just the way we lived. It was lifestyle that to belittle the the contribution, but it was very much the kind of the development of modern psycho understanding that was almost like taking the picture of that way of living and that way of working with ourselves and the planet, and kind of putting it into the modalities that we know today. And it was done in component parts. It's one person took this corner of the picture and one person took this corner of the picture, and these became modalities. But they all come from the same base picture,
from the same source. And you could argue that the same with mindfulness, mindfulness based psychotherapy. That fundamentally stems from the practice in Buddhism. And the NHS finally caught up a few thousand years later and said, we can evidence-base this. There's a way of measuring the way that we breathe. So we all gave them a round of applause and said, well done. And now they utilize it within the service of the NHS, which is fantastic. But it's a very watered down version from its original teachings. But again, it just shows that, and it's very effective. I was a mindfulness-based practitioner myself for many years, for Turning Point, I believe it was. And but again, it shows that the source is thousands of years old. It's not new. It's been around a long time. And like you say, the name shaman didn't exist back then. We've labeled it in order to comprehend it and understand it better. It will just be, I'll go and see Jim, the old fella, over there, and he'll give you some medicine and talk to spirit and so on and so forth. It wouldn't be a shaman. You wouldn't say, go and see that shaman over there. Maybe nowadays, but even the shamanic practitioner wouldn't call themselves a shaman. The shaman wouldn't call themselves a shaman. I only identify myself as a shamanic practitioner because I'm not a shaman, far from it, because people understand it's a little different then.
And the stigma and everything that was groomed into the consciousness around those mindsets and that way of thinking around balance with the world and everything else in Europe, we'd experienced that long before the Industrial Revolution, because we called those people witches. So we can see how this isn't just something from an ancient culture in a faraway land. These practices and mindsets were right across the world, weren't they?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people along the way, I think that's just the teaching within itself, one of those things to learn about, because it was all over the world, including this country, and there's a lot of old sites in this country. You just look at in Dartmoor, it's old sweat lodge sites, old stone ones from thousands of years ago. You got sites all over the country, all the stones and so on and so forth, Scotland, England, Wales. And I think what we've got to try and remember with that is the Romans. I'm not very good with my timeline stuff, but when the Romans came over and wanted to destroy this country, they destroyed a lot of the artifacts and writings of old ancient practices. And not only just shamanism, it was a bit different in each country, but definitely different in this country, because we got the more of the Celtic pagan life here. And what happened is, when the Romans destroyed all the artifacts and was killing our people run off into the West countries, into Scotland, into Ireland and Wales, because the Romans found it difficult to fight in that environment. This is my teachings anyway. And And with that, the survival of old ancient ways continued, but it wasn't no longer in a physical form. We had to restart again.
Mm.
But I do believe there's a consciousness in that as well, that in a consciousness, in an energy sort of level, that that information sort of stays out there, if you will, until the right people come along and align themselves with that consciousness to be able to bring it back into this middle world. And a lot more is happening of it today. A lot of people go abroad for their teachings, like Peru and Mexico and so on and so forth, because the artifacts out there was never stolen and burnt.
Mm.
Like it was in this country. So, you know, it's a lot of mishmash of different practices in shamanism, over here. But yeah,
but it's clear how over the course of history, the dominant power forces throughout our timeline, certainly in the UK, have all tried to suppress that natural empowerment, that way of thinking and that way of living and engaging was something that those powerhouses just could not abide.
And again, that you link that back really again to the Romans and to the Christians. It's the Christians demonized spiritual practices, as you mentioned, like burning witches. You know, they weren't witches; they were women. They were women doing what we do today. You know, so
and understanding how the natural world helps, because we're part of the natural world.
We are.
And that kind of divergent thinking, that, you know, we are not part of that, we are a higher being, and we control this and that, and we can control the flow of a river. We can, but we cannot control the impact when the floodplain that you've just emptied is used by nature. We, you know, whatever we do has a consequence, and the holistic, all-encompassing connection and balance with our natural world is very much what understood that.
And when you want to link, you know, start linking some forms of psychotherapy out there to the old ways, if you will, whether you want to call it shamanism, ever what you want to call it, is it's not something I've been involved in. I have too many other things going on in my life. But there's training out there where it's psychotherapy in nature. It's come past me. I've not really sort of looked at it. I haven't had the time yet. And a lot of it is taking clients out into nature, and it's all like mindfulness again, sort of comes into it. And then I think, how beautiful is that? Because we're using psychotherapy in a way that we're going back to our original roots, where we belong on earth,
and
nature.
And I can remember being taught many years ago that pre-pharmaceutical dominance, that the early Victorian age of medical support, their two largest prescription categories were blue therapy and green therapy. Blue therapy was get out so you can see the sea or you can see the sky.
Okay.
And green therapy was get out into nature, get into the hills, get into the woods, take your shoes off and feel the grass under your feet.
Absolutely.
And I still use blue and green therapy on a daily basis. You know, I live by the sea with a great big massive hill full of greenery on the shoreline. It's,
mm,
when we connect to those things that are bigger than us, that are impacted less by us directly, but en masse, obviously, we've come to
mm,
understand how much we've impacted, but that's a different conversation. But
mm,
we start to realize that our
mm,
place becomes different.
mm, mm.
And I think that's one of the biggest things that over the last 250 plus years, we're starting to return to understanding we need that component.
Absolutely. And it's
I
becoming
think
more
that's
and more, I think it's becoming more and more obvious. And what's becoming more and more obvious as well is that I don't know what it's like out in the city so much, but down in the West countries, there's a lot more communities, self-supporting communities.
Mm.
You know, you can. Some people might want to call them traveller sites and that, but actually, to quite a few of these places I've visited,
Mm.
places that where I go training,
Mm.
and they are self-supporting villages
Mm.
that don't have electric, for example.
Mm.
They'll have a generator on for a couple of hours a day.
Mm. And
And again, it's going back to our old roots,
mm.
and people doing that more and more, I've noticed.
Yeah, and I think it's, you can look at it on a lot of different kind of levels, because we see, certainly in recent years, and whether that's because of social changes, whether that's because of the systemic overload, whatever it might be, but we're seeing groupings forming. We're
Mm,
seeing people coming together
mm,
with different mindsets, but they're not isolating people within those individual groupings. We're seeing people form collectives in
mm,
a way that we
mm,
haven't seen
mm.
for hundreds of years, because we're I believe we are reconnecting with that understanding of being social creatures, not digitally social creatures.
Absolutely, and I think for me, the consciousness is rising, or ever since the pandemic. I think since
The
then,
launch pad.
and yeah, I'm not sort of here to talk about that stuff, but I've noticed since then there's been some fundamental changes amongst society,
Mm.
and
I think the 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 pandemic is fast becoming a topic that is almost, we don't speak about it,
yeah,
but we don't speak about it because of all of the negative management around that situation.
yeah, it's fear,
What-
isn't it? At the
Yeah,
end of fear,
but
and people are
I think
scared.
what we can talk about, Phil, is how powerful the impact of what a pandemic has always
Mm,
done when it hits. And
mm,
what it's always done has brought people to a closer understanding of the need for each other.
yeah,
It brings people to an understanding of what is actually important on a day-to-day basis, which is that unity and that mutual connectivity.
hmm,
But it's also awakened a a renewed understanding that the management systems and the infrastructures that had been in place were not flexible enough to respond to that situation.
hmm,
And we don't know what to do with that, because we were dependent on those infrastructures.
mm,
And there is we said this right at the very beginning of the pandemic. This is going to be a grief experience like we have not had in our lifetime, because this is not only a grief of the people that were lost, and to everyone who experienced that, APA has always put out our deepest condolences. But there is also a grief to our system, our way of working. Our structures were completely taken away. But that has always, throughout history,
and what
been
was
an
left?
opportunity.
And what was left? This is what was left. Mother Nature.
Yeah.
Our Earth. Our infrastructure, the very thing that keeps us alive. And what I've witnessed from that is that we've going back to that more and more and more since then. There's been so many more communities that have been coming up. There's so much more spiritualism. I'll be careful with the word spiritualism myself. I'm not a pink fluffy spiritualist person.
So let's address the spiritual label, because traditionally spiritualism has been attributed to religious spiritualization. And that's not where the phrase, as you and I understand spiritualism, sits.
You probably understand it more than I do, Dave.
But we've had a long time of being told anyone who talks about spiritualism is referring to A, B, or C, when actually nobody actually asks, what do you refer to? We make the assumption, because we've been groomed into that's what spiritualism is.
We've been groomed into fearing it.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I love many a Christian person out there, and I'm not out to sabotage any religions, but it was religion that created that.
And we can understand and we can contextualize all of the reasonings and all of the benefits that come from that connectivity for those individuals, and nobody would cast an aspersion in any one way or the other for any of those. What we do know is that within all of those different modalities, and religion is a modality of faith, and each religion is a different modality to the faith, and faith is a spiritualism.
And you can have both together, of course, as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's science and religion.
I used to look at it like this. I remember somebody sharing with me many years ago, religion is for those that don't want to go to hell. Spiritualism are for those that have been to hell and just don't want to go back.
It's a beautiful way of looking at it, really.
A very simple way.
Yeah, but all of it is based on that fundamental human emotion of fear.
Yeah,
and managing fear. And whatever the situation is, whatever drives a person to their escape hatch, if you like, from that fear, should never be closed because of their kind of the grooming that's got them to that escape hatch. An escape.
I lost you slightly there, Dave.
Okay, so what I'm just saying, whatever has brought somebody to a particular escape hatch, they should never be, those hatches should never be closed simply because of the path they've taken to get to it.
Absolutely.
And all of those escape hatches have their merit for that individual, because that's the hatch they've got to.
Absolutely.
And that should always always be remembered. And for those out there who kind of would shut escape hatches because of their own thought processes, everything else, I would ask you why would somebody reaching out to a particular modality that you might not understand, you might not have experience of, be shut down? That's something that we've
and
seen.
that's trauma right there. That shutting down. We talk about trauma. That's trauma right there. We talk about fear. That's the other person's fear right there being projected onto the other person to slam that door.
And that's something that, as you know, you've seen APA from our infancy.
Yes, I can remember when it was born.
Yes, you were at the very retreat. You were at the very retreat that Siobhan and I held, which we came away from, and Siobhan says, "I've got a great idea."
That's it.
And what are your thoughts? You've seen APA grow. Let's talk about kind of the connectivity there. What are your thoughts around that journey, and what APA is doing for the wider world?
Well, I've been so wrapped up in my little world, Dave, that to extend my consciousness elsewhere is sometimes a bit of a tall order. But for me, what I've seen, and this is why I've joined yourselves, is professionalism, trust. There's a safety. I feel a sense of safety, and there's a lot of stuff to be learnt, and it's my stuff that I haven't educated myself along the way of all the stuff that you put out there. You put some really great material out there, and I like the way that that I've witnessed along the way, how you bring in other people and set up this sort of thing in order to say, hey, there's more than one person here, and you're gathering a tribe. In my terminology, you're gathering a big tribe and of like-minded and professional people, and you're still in your infancy as well, I believe. And it's exciting, that is, because what you've produced so far it's been incredible over it's not been many years neither, has it?
No, really. Our July will be our 4th birthday.
Yeah, I was thinking it was 4 or 5, but yeah,
and as we
said that,
July. Well, thank you very much. And Siobhan is I'm sure she's scheming something for July. I really do. I get this sense that there is something going on in the background. But you came to the last retreat pre APA as a membership body, and there was a lot of people at that event who I think actually helped shape the way Siobhan and I came into the membership, and you were part of that. And I would be remiss of me not to acknowledge and thank you for your contribution to that very early kind of formation in our minds of what can be done by having all of those experiences as part of the ether that we were exposed to at that time. And it's important to acknowledge those components. It's a bit like saying, let's thank the universe for the world, but let's not mention the nitrogen.
Right, yes.
And I think in a lot of ways that energy that you bring, and that understanding of that energy, gave us an awful lot of kind of connectivity that we were able to use, and that's important to acknowledge too. So thank you for that. So
Welcome.
moving forward, life, universe, and everything. Where would you like to see the understanding of what's been termed shamanism?
Love. Really, at the end of the day, it's connecting to the heart. So I'm putting my hand on my heart. You can't see me. But it's about connecting to the heart. And isn't it what it's all about? Is connecting to ourselves, to our heart, to love ourselves as human beings, rather than destroying ourselves with all that stuff out there, you know, that happens to us and what's happening. It's being able to, like you say, you can go right back to the beginning and finding that balance on the seesaw. And for me, it's about love. Just take the label shamanism away, you know. It's all about love at the end of the day, loving ourselves and loving our fellow human being and loving our planet.
Yeah, and
our home.
And this is where again we can see that segmentation of thinking, that, you know, loving ourselves is one kind of mindset that is driven towards the wider audience. Loving the planet is a separate kind of drive.
It can be,
yeah, but when,
if you want it to be,
yeah, and that's the, you know, that's the modality that we've been groomed into, is everything is in isolation. And when we look at those, you know, that it's almost like sections of a wheel, you know, let's look at this section, and that's your psychotherapeutic balance. Let's look at this is your environmental balance. Let's look at this. But they all forget that they're connected. They're all of these sections all make up the wheel that is the human experience. And like you say, when we connect to ourselves, that's the hub. That's where all of it flows from. And the more we can connect to that, the more awareness we have of all of those components, the more balanced that wheel becomes.
Absolutely.
And I think that's key.
Absolutely. And for me, shamanism is one of many practices that help to, you know, get that all the spokes into place, so it's all balanced. And anything for me that's physical, mental, and spiritual in a modality, if it holds those components, physical, mental, and spiritual, I think we're on a good ride.
Yeah.
When we miss one of those out, you know, it's not complete.
Yeah, and the wheel becomes out of balance, and we kind of limp round.
Yeah, we do.
And, you know, for all of those that have discovered the more ancient ways of thinking, they find that they emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally find more balance. And that's a pretty big clue that there is balance available if we are brave enough to step to it. And
Absolutely. And
take that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's everywhere. You know, this you know, when it's, you know, you got to say, like, we got it in shaman, you got it in yoga, for example. That's a practice that's been around for thousands of years, an old ancient practice. Yoga, what's that? It's physical, it's mental discipline, and spiritual discipline. Ever how you want to internalize or interpretate what spiritualism is. You know, for me, fundamentally, as well as being connected to the earth, it's being connected to something other than my physical objects, physical self and physical objects, beyond the personal.
And I think on that is a great kind of getting off point for now. and to say anybody that has learned anything from this conversation that they can use to benefit the work that they do, you are able to get a CPD certificate for this conversation. All you need to do is complete the conversation, the CPD validation questionnaire, which will be in the link to this video. Get that to us, get that CPD certificate for this conversation, because APA does not offer CPD certificates just for watching. Actually have to let us know what it is that you've learned from this experience, and that reinforces that balance to your clients and to the wider world of what it is that you are learning and benefiting from. So thank you for joining us. Phil, thank you so much for your time. It's been
Thank you, Dave.
It's been an absolute pleasure to chat. It always is. It's, you know, it's the first time we've been able to get the record button on, but
yeah, I'm glad it's happened.
Been good. It's really good. And if anybody wants to get hold of you, Phil, where can they do that? Where can they get more information?
Yeah, so and thank you people for listening. And I'm available on Facebook. I'm under Phil Whitefeather. I use that as a lot as for my work and business. My website is www.whitefeatherwellbeing.com, and my email address is throughandbeyond@btinternet.com.
And we'll put those links into the comments for the video. So
thank you, Dave. Thank you very much.
You're absolutely welcome. And as we've said many times, if anyone has any questions or any comments, put them into the links to the video, and we will respond. And we look forward to a point where, as Phil said, the concept of shamanism is understood in a way that does reconnect to the heart. That's where everything that ancient mindset and that ancient way of living that we know was more balanced, we know was more connected, and we know didn't have a digital network, was definitely something to aspire to. And as Phil's mentioned, a lot of people are reconnecting to it. So if that's you and you want more information, get in touch with Phil. If you've got any questions about APA, feel free to get in touch. But for now, wherever you are, however you are, take care, and we will see you soon in another conversation. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.